Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Risk, where our goal is to connect, engage, and inspire our global community of risk practitioners. So I'm super excited to welcome all of you and really excited to welcome my guest, Erhan Ilhan. And Erhan has many years of experience in the medical device industry, both as a software engineer and also a quality professional. And currently, he is the head of quality at Circadia Health. So he has done it all hands on. But before I get into my conversation with Erhan, I want to welcome all of you and invite you to introduce yourself very briefly and share where you are joining from. Guys, this is a very casual conversation, more an effort to build a community than to teach or give a webinar or lecture. So I hope you'll have a good time today and you'll participate. With that, Erhan, welcome to our show. Thank you for joining. How are you doing today?
Hi, Naveen, and hi, everyone. Naveen, first of all, thank you for inviting me. This is a great platform you created, so thank you. For me, yes, my name is Erhan Ilhan. I've been in the medical device industry over 15 years. I started as a software engineer doing development and also writing tests, and then morph into the quality and regulatory side of the business, if you will. So that's now consider myself a specialist on quality and regulatory when it comes to medical device, be it hardware, software, or the whole life cycle.
That's just amazing, Erhan. So I know we're going to talk about software risk management with you today. So first, let's get started. Tell us a little bit more about how software risk management in medical device is different and what kind of standards and other stuff that we should be mindful of.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good thing to talk about. And I know software in medical device is not new, but it's still relatively new. Typically, we've been talking about more on the hardware side. And to me, the biggest difference is that software is not the difference is doesn't have a direct harm. It cannot hurt you directly. That's the huge difference, I think. And when we talk about that is the difference, again, versus in hardware where, for example, I worked on pacemaker or implantable devices. If something goes wrong in the firmware, it can actually kill you. But a software as SAMD, software as a medical device, cannot do that directly. So it has to be a sequence of events to lead to a hazardous situation for it to manifest itself on the patient side, meaning there has to be something else in it. I think there's the distinction that to be made, even if it's not a direct harm, but it's still a software risk.
So let's touch on that because I think it keeps coming up in my conversations with colleagues in the industry that generally we don't have a good understanding of why a software functionality might fail. And we are asked to assume the probability of that failure to be 1. But what I'm hearing you say is that is not everything that is associated with the sequence of events. And because of that, we should not be assuming probability of hazardous situation as 1. Is that correct? Like, how do we explain this? Because I know people struggle with this.
Yeah, that's a good point on that one. The probability of a software failure, it is true. It's difficult to estimate. And the reason for that is for hardware, you can have scientific ways of measuring how something, when it's going to fatigue or break. For software, those are systematic issues, meaning it does require a specific condition for it to fail. And how do you assess that probability? Or I'm not going to go into the P1 and P2 calculation to get the P0, but the part that is important, if we assume that the probability of software failure is 1 over time, then it's the hazardous situation or that you have to kind of try to quantify, which could be difficult because it's specific to your device or your business.
Correct. But I think the point here is that let's not just assume right away that probability of hazardous situation will also be 1 just because you have a software failure. We could do a little bit more work and be a little bit more precise. So I hope that will be clear to folks. But, Arhan, this is actually a very conversational and engaging forum. So we already have a question. I'm going to start with that question for you. If you can think about that and share your thoughts. The question comes from Girish, who says he has a question regarding the new 2.0 edition of IEC 62304. How does it impact software development, especially with removing normative reference to ISO 14971? In addition, 2.0 IEC 62304. Does this change affect software development in any way? So, would you mind sharing some high-level comments? We don't want to go too deep into that, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I did see that second edition. I started opening it yesterday myself to look at it. I'm not sure if they really remove 14971. I think if at least on the FDA side, if you're having a medical device, the standard to go to is still 14971. So I'm not totally sure if they really removed it. Even I think 62304 still points to that standard for risk.
Yeah, and I would expect that. I think what I would say is that this is a best practice, right? To follow 14971, and I know there are several people in the audience who may also have insights about this. So I invite you guys to share your thoughts in the comments. What impact that might have on software risk management moving forward if that's the case. So Arhan, let's continue our conversation. We wanted to talk about some of the real practical challenges that you have come across in your practice when it comes to software risk management.
Yeah, so from our standpoint, another thing that I wanted to mention, we talk about pre-market and post-market. During pre-market, when you design, you do everything possible during your design. And one thing that you have to keep in mind is, and that's something that we've been doing more and more, and even the FDA points to, collecting real world data. And because no matter what you do during your design, when it hits the market and it's used by thousands of people, you will discover things. It's very important to take that data back into your design as a software risk management or to build a better device. So that's one thing that you have to be mindful of, Naveen.
Perfect. So, Arhan, can you share some examples of software failures that you have come across that might affect safety of a medical device?
Yeah, so a lot of them that we've seen is, even though we always do usability testing, human factor testing, and normally when we develop our device, we normally go through a formative usability testing first to try to really create our UI and everything, and then at the end have a summative testing to really confirm our final design. But we've seen that because our device is used by hundreds of thousands of people, then in some cases, it's difficult to cover everyone. So we've seen issues on how it's being used, and that can lead to risk or issue or interpretation of the UI, things like that. That's important to take back in.
So can you share some best practices that we can use based on your experience?
Yeah. So the best practices that again, do your usability human factor testing. We normally do a formative early on to get the screens out, have it tested by normally like 15 or so people in that. And then once your UI is finalized, do a summative testing again, maybe with more people. It's not a clinical study, but try to have every demographic represented, if you will, because you don't exactly know who is going to use it. And this is one thing, Naveen, if I may, is there's this trend now with home health. That's something that we have to discuss, I think, because there's a difference if it's an HCP, a healthcare professional that is using your device. They're normally qualified, and you can train them out of it. With this trend of going home health, that's going to be even more important because that's going to open it to a lot more people.
I think you're absolutely right. And what you are saying here is that there is actually a connection, a linkage between software development and our understanding of usability and user interface. And this reminds me, a couple of recent de novos that I have reviewed. One actually came from Apple. which is about, they have turned their AirPods into hearing aids. I don't know if you have heard about that, but it was, it's a software. So basically a software device on their iOS platform. And I distinctly remember in the demo, they talk about the usability studies they did and proved that, hey, this was really working as intended. And they made some improvements also. So I think can you talk a little bit more about this linkage between the two? From a software development side, it made it very intuitive why we had to do so much usability.
Are you referring again to the user interface, usability side of it?
So yeah, because I think a part of the software failure could be driven by or initiated by use error.
So one thing that we also do, because it's difficult to do a usability for everything, right? So what you want to do is find the critical part of your device. So what we have in our software risk management, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but normally we identify based on the final severity above, our numbers. If it's certain above a certain number, we identify those functionality as critical from our risk assessment and risk analysis work, and we really test those with real users before we go to market. So, because it's obviously difficult to do everything, but at least once we identify the critical part of the functionality, those are the ones that will be tested thoroughly in the field, quote unquote, in the field before it goes to market.
But so this makes a very good point about doing this analysis early in the development so that it informs your action plan. And that should include usability as well. So I think that we should emphasize that risk analysis, or whatever you want to call it, should not be done like as a check the box towards the end. Right?
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, you have to really front load all this in the beginning of your development. And even where we are, I work for a small company and our resources are limited, of course, but we do all that work ahead of time so that we can fit in as an input to our design.
Perfect. So, Erhan, we do have a question, and this relates to, again, probability. So I know we don't want to go too much in detail, but with this question, it tells me we have a lot of interest. So to the extent, without going into too many weeds, if you can help shed some light on this. So here's a question from Darpan who asks, how to define probability of failure more defects in software FMEA or hazard analysis? It assumes that defects appear or software failure occurred or not occurred. How the qualitative range 1 to 5 shall be used to define probability rank in FMEA? Could you give just a very high level response to this? Because I know this is a problem in the practical application.
Yeah, so for this one, if we take the example of the software FMEA or software failure mode effect analysis, when we conduct those, and again, this is based on your software architecture and detailed design. Mm-hmm. When we think about a certain unit that we do an SFMEA on, we do assume that that is going to fail. Now, the hazardous situation that will bring it to risk is either or qualitative way or a quantitative way to do. So that's with the team that we do to give it a number. But for have to assume that the software may fail.
And I think this makes emphasize the point that we should be doing this analysis early on so that we always assume software will fail, but what other sequence of events would actually lead to the specific hazardous situations? We need to articulate that in the beginning, and we may not be very accurate about that, right? And that's fine, but we can have some idea about how it will relate to the harm. And as you emphasize, hey, harm is not going to happen directly. Greg, we'll continue our conversation. And guys, if you're joining us just now, we are talking to Erhan today about software risk management. So keep your questions and comments coming in the chat. So far, we are having a great conversation, and that's the purpose of our discussion today. So, let's continue. Can you think of another common software failure that you had to deal with? And you don't need to go into too many details, but in what other ways you had encountered software failing, there might be bugs into it or something else.
You know what I mean? I'm going to bring this one up because it just came up yesterday from the FDA communication. And then the reason I want to bring it up is for diabetes system. And I worked for Medtronic for many years on the diabetes side also.
Yeah.
And I know that, and the exact issue is your phone a medical device? Normally, the phone is not a medical device, but more and more it becomes a medical device. So for people who have diabetes, a glucose monitoring system that they have on their body, the phone has become the medical device where it gives alert if you're going. Not going too much into detail on the diabetes, but if you're going high or low in your sugar level, it alerts you. So now what happens, and this is very fresh off the press, I think it was out of yesterday, I saw it pop up in my inbox, is what happens is, you change your settings, you do not disturb, or you change your version of the phone, you update it, and then some of the things may not work anymore. So that creates, this is software. It's indirect risk to patient. One thing that happens is you start relying on the phone to give you an alert when you go in high, when you're diabetes, so you can give yourself an injection. And if you rely on it and you don't get it, then you can, really get into the trouble. So it really popped up yesterday. So it was still fresh in my mind.
It reminds me of a safety-related recall. I think it's a recall a few months back where the app on the iOS platform was crashing the iOS platform, the diabetes system also. I keep a very close eye on diabetes applications too, because to me, it's a fascinating, complicated application. So in this particular case, the app was crashing the iOS system and rebooting it many times, and that was draining the battery from the insulin pump. And that was an issue that was identified, and maybe, I don't know what kind of testing they did on compatibility with the iOS platform. And we know iOS platform goes through so many updates. So how do we keep track of all that?
No, you brought I was, I think, in the trenches when we were testing all the batteries issues for the diabetes side. And we've done this is to give an overview of what's going on in the background, right? Doing a lot of work to mitigate those kind of issues. I mean, a lot of work. A lot of people worked on this, and the battery one, I'm very familiar because it was one of my Kappa when I was working on it. Yeah, and we had, so many people working on this, really making sure that this doesn't happen. But like I said, when it goes out of the building, it's difficult to predict everything. So again, going to the post-market surveillance, getting that data back is really, really important.
Yes. So, Erhard, let's switch gears a little bit, because one of the emerging topics is cybersecurity. And there's a question here from Edwin. What are the issues with software cybersecurity and its associated risks? How do we introduce cybersecurity risks into 14971? Do you have any high-level thoughts on that?
That's a great question, because it just did a pre-submission 2 weeks ago, actually. And now, of course, you have to take the cybersecurity guidance from the FDA into consideration. And the way we do this is, now it's not only safety risk, but also cybersecurity risk. Those two things, even as a risk management plan, the FDA wants us to do two different ones, one for safety, one for security. So the way we do this, we have two different risk assessment. One for the one that we have for cybersecurity, there's different methods that you can use, also for threat modeling, penetration testing, and all that. But for the risk assessment alone is, again, we have a criteria, is because when we do analysis, is can this lead to a safety issue? And if it is, then we link it back to our safety risk assessment, which is back to 4971. So you have to link the two, security to safety if from this cybersecurity can lead to a safety issue. So we have a link between those two risk documents that we have in-house.
But again, I think we might face the same challenges, right? Because it may result into harm through a sequence of events and sort of indirectly, right?
Yeah, because our cyber doesn't lead to harm and all that, because, in essence, it's a cybersecurity issue. But so all the harm and everything is handled on the safety risk assessment, if you will. But there is a connection if it leads to that.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you.
And
guys,
again, the end goal of this, to doing all this work, is to come with, we haven't said the word yet, Navin, so I want to put it out, is the risk control measures. That's the end goal, right? To create these risk control measures to diminish, to help with the original harm.
Great. So let's talk about that a little bit. So you're doing cybersecurity on one side, safety risk assessment on one side. You find risk control measures. How do you make sure that they don't contradict or conflict with each other?
The risk control measure they contradict, or
Correct. So you might implement some risk control measures on the cybersecurity side, some risk control measures on the safety side. How do you make sure that there's a good handshake? And I'm assuming that there are different teams working on these areas.
That's a very good question, Navin. So the way every risk control measures that we create based on either safety risk or cybersecurity, which is the end goal. The work that you do, the end goal is risk control measure. If you do all this work and you have no risk control measure, wasted time, because then you don't change anything, right? So all of our risk control measures, and just to give an idea, I think we had like 200 of them in the last project that we had, goes back to it becomes a requirement, an SRS in this case. So an SRS have to be unique. So that way we make sure that, there is no conflict in there. There's no ambiguity. One says to do this, one says to do that. And it goes through the design review and all that. But every risk control measure that we create gets back into the SRS document.
So let's emphasize that point, because I know from my experience, that's a major gap in our practice, connecting these risk analyses and risk controls directly into design inputs. So what you are saying here is very, very important, right, Aram? So let's emphasize that. Okay, guys, we still have a few minutes left, so I invite you to continue sharing your questions, comments in the chat. And as you can see, we are getting a very lively conversation with Erhan here. So don't lose this opportunity and share what you had in mind. While we wait for their questions, Erhan, I'm going to ask you to just give a big picture view here. Like our world is changing from a technology perspective, AI, ML. Now we hear about Gen AI. What's happening? What's the latest state of affairs in MedTech when it comes to these evolving technologies?
Yeah, I think it's not a secret that everybody has been exposed now. AI ML has democratized, and to put it back in perspective, I think in 2019 when I was at Medtronic, we were working directly with the FDA at that point to create all those standards, and now it's everywhere. And it becomes, software first came and went everywhere, and now AI ML goes everywhere. I think the next step, and I think I mentioned it a few times, is home health. Now, because of the cost of hospitals and all that, there's going to be a switch there where it's a lot more home health, right? You don't have to go to the hospital if you don't need to, of course. But so that puts the emphasis on devices even more, especially on risk, because now you're in everybody's home and you really have to make sure that device is working, because if there is a risk in your design in a hospital setting, you have qualified people there in case there's some mitigating factor. But at home, all that, there's no more safety net. So risk, software risk, AI risk becomes even more important. I've just done a pre-submission for our device. I'm not going to share the details, but we've been in contact with the FDA last 2 weeks. A lot of questions, even though it's only a pre-sub, a lot of questions on risk that we've got. especially, on the input side, all the data, they really, really want to know what type of data, how clean is the quality of the data that comes in before even you start putting in your algorithm and try to, predict and something, if you will. So, the in terms of software risk has to be even more important, especially when I'm going to the home health part.
And in that scenario, Farhan, I think we have to think about the whole system. When we are in the home environment, I'm guessing most likely our data is being stored in the cloud or being shared with a physician. They are reviewing it, they are taking some action, giving us some advice back. I think it has we have to consider the whole system, not just maybe our specific device or our app that is driving that device. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's you're totally on point. The whole system, like you said, because it doesn't work as standalone. Even if you have a device in someone's home, it is connected to the back end and in the cloud. Again, cybersecurity is also another big issue, of course, that you have to put in place as soon as there is connection with the cloud. And that's why the FDA has the full guidance. The cybersecurity guidance a couple of years ago was, I think, 17 pages, and now might be like 70 pages. So
yes,
it gives you the picture of that they're really paying attention to that too.
Yeah. So, Aaron, I know we are coming close to our end time here, but I want to touch upon one topic which is close to my heart, and you made a point of that too: post-market surveillance. I personally believe in the world of software, AI, and ML. Post-market surveillance would be even more important, not less. Can you share some unique challenges that we might face in the near future when it comes to post-market surveillance?
Yeah, post-market surveillance, I think, like you said, it's very important. We touched base on it at the beginning of this talk. And a post-market with real-world data that you have to bring back in. And it does require a structure to do those things. The challenge is, for, of course, big companies, it might be with the resources, it's easier to do. But to really collect that data is maybe the easier part, but to really analyze the data and getting back and making sense of it for your design, that's the challenging part, because that's really, really, really important data. Almost at pre-market, everything you do in the pre-market before it goes out, but post-market is real world data. It's very the very important part.
Yeah. So we have to be really good at now doing it fast and becoming really quite adaptable and quite flexible. So, Aaron, I'm going to start closing out our conversation today. But guys, I hope you are having fun. I would love to hear your reaction. Use the emoji icons and let us know how you like this conversation. And any other question, comment on your mind, please share in the chat. So, Aaron, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to just process your thoughts and summarize some key points for us as a takeaway point. And in the meantime, I'm going to give a couple of announcements to our colleagues here. Guys, the first announcement is, speaking of post-market safety surveillance, I want to share with you that I had just launched a brand new workshop, 4-hour workshop, which goes through a lot of information and hands-on exercises. Now, I've done a lot of work in this area, so this is all very hands-on and practical. We just kicked off that workshop this week with the first group of attendees, and it's limited to only 10 people at a time because I want good discussion, good conversation. So if you're interested in that workshop, the next one is coming up soon. Reach out to me. Let me know you're interested, and I'll share the information with you. The second announcement I want to make again is, for those of you who may not know, this is a weekly event. Every week we get on a live show like this, have a conversation, and involve you in that conversation. So show up every Friday, 11 Eastern. And if you can, for one reason or another, a recording of every podcast is available on the Let's Talk Risk newsletter. So take advantage of that. You can listen to past recordings. And finally, and most importantly, connect with each other. You reach out to people on this panel or the speakers that I invite. Make connections, share your own perspective. And that's how we advance the whole industry forward. So with that, Erhan, the floor is yours. If you could please share some key takeaway points with us.
First, Naveen, thank you for this opportunity here, and everyone that has been here listening. It's been great experience. I'm not gonna make it long, but just leave it with one final thought, if you will, is as professionals, like everyone here is in our industry, quality, regulatory, or in anyone working in medical device. My number one thing is always when I go sleep at night, do I feel that my software is not gonna hurt anyone? So always that thinking, the risk thinking. Of course, we can go into detail, pre-market, post-market, things like that. But is my software in the field safe for the patients? That's the most important part.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect way to close, Erhan. I want to thank you for giving us your time. I know you are super busy. I wish you all the best with your pre-sub and following conversations with the FDA. And I hope you are able to continue to launch these innovative products in the marketplace. Thank you so much again. And thanks everybody who joined today and participated so openly in this conversation. See how many comments we have in our chat. This is what inspires me and energizes me. And I hope you guys also enjoyed it as well. So thanks everybody. We will once again connect next week.